All right, we're delighted to be joined by Simon Hart, who we've had on before. He wrote the book Everton in the 80s, which was a fascinating read. Myself and Joe did a phoner with him a few years ago, but this time it's a new book, World in Motion, the Inside Story of Italia 90, the tournament that changed football, as you can see there, and Simon Hart is here with me. That tournament, now, I was only one, so I've no first-hand memory of it, but the kind of, I suppose, the stereotype I have of it is poor football, but culturally probably the most rich of the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably generally true in what you say. Lowest scoring World Cup ever, so it was very significant, and it led to rule changes, significant rule changes, which really have paved the way for the football we have today. Politically, the last World Cup for a lot of, several big players from Eastern Europe, USSR, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, as it was. West Germany's last World Cup, and big impact in different countries, England, of course, Ireland, but not just Costa Rica's first World Cup, places like that. The States were back on the football map after 40 years, and of course Cameroon, the first victory by any African team from south of the Sahara.
For the major nations, though, I know for Ireland and England, for England, it's the best World Cup they've had since '66. For us, it's our first one. It's the one we always hark back to. It's a big cultural moment for us, and obviously for Cameroon. But you kind of touched on Costa Rica and the likes of those. But for others, was it as massively culturally significant as it has seemed to be for us?
You mean as in countries like Costa Rica?
For West Germany, is it something they always hark back to, or is it maybe does it fall kind of down the list in comparison to other World Cups?
I mean, it's interesting just to throw one example at you, say Argentina. I went over to Buenos Aires and spoke to a couple of their players, Goycochea, the goalkeeper, Alberto Coechea as well. And they were saying that if you compare their Argentina team, who got to a final in '90, lost 1-0 to West Germany, to the 2014 team, same story, got to a final, lost 1-0 to Germany. And they think that it meant much more then, because more players played in Argentina. The World Cup was somehow more of a special event because there wasn't saturation coverage of World Cups, football as we have today. So I think in every country, culturally, it had that more significance simply because of the rarity of a World Cup and of that football festival.
Yeah. And I suppose the Cameroon game against Argentina obviously sets the tone, and both in the physical sense, and I think Claudio Caniggia, probably the tone probably bellowed around that stadium when he was hit by Benjamin Massing. Sadly passed away in December, but you met Massing in the course of making your book, and obviously you met about 100 people in the course of making it. And Massing, obviously you said it to me just before we came in here, that he was kind of a gentle giant. Aside from that, in terms of, I suppose it does set the tone, but the football itself in that match, how would you quantify it? Was it of a decent standard?
I mean, it was fascinating to watch that game again, from start to finish. There were 13 back passes to Thomas Nkono in the first half alone.
Yeah.
Obviously, the back pass ban came into place in '92 directly as a result of what happened at Italia 90. And poor old Maradona was just brutalised, really. I mean, within the first 20 minutes, somebody had caught him up on the shoulder and his shirt was torn. But what struck me really was Maradona's reaction to being kicked around, where he just kind of looked a bit weary, a bit fed up, but get up and get on with it. Whereas, today we have the player will roll around the pitch, stay down, physio comes on. It was almost an acceptance for Maradona. This is what I'm up against. Caniggia comes on the pitch 4 times. First 4 times he's on the ball, he's hacked down. So just that casual brutality really stood out. But the bits of Maradona when he got the ball, and despite he went into the World Cup with an ankle problem, despite being kicked from pillar to post, just this exceptional footballer. I mean, in that World Cup, he was fouled 53 times. Messi, same games in in Brazil 2014, was fouled 18 times.
Oh, wow.
So just as a measure of what he was up against. So they're the things which really stand out.
Yeah, and I suppose moving on to England, Bobby Robson is obviously, the late Bobby Robson, he's heralded now pre-tournament, it's a completely different picture. Yet it's very funny how, you know, space of 5-6 games, and you know, aside from just the matches as well, just the few days as well that the team are together, the relationship between media and manager can change completely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that story for England is a real, I mean, it's day and night. It's a redemption tale, which probably explains its impact in England. Robson was being vilified by the press. The England players weren't speaking to the press. After the game with Ireland, you know, the Sun had this ridiculous diatribe asking Margaret Thatcher to bring the boys home and spare us any more, you know, humiliation. And yet 3 weeks later, they're heroes. You know, they're the best England World Cup team since '66. So it was an incredible turnaround. And poor old Robson got so much stick prior to, you know, his.
Yeah. But as a gentleman, he obviously kind of, I know he can be, you know, you can be a bit not aggressive, but passive aggressive towards the media. But he did kind of take it in his stride, and I guess he's taking in all that criticism, and maybe the players are spared some of that.
Yeah, I mean, the players. The problem with the players was there was the Daily Mirror ran a story about a couple of players and a hostess.
Yeah.
A woman who worked in the hotel they were in on Sardinia, and that's what created the rift there. But again, you know, the history of World Cups, teams who are under siege. Italy have won the World Cup twice, you know, with having that kind of pressure from their press. So England used it to their advantage.
Yeah. The football, like in terms, when you actually look back at England's results, I know they went further than they had since 1966, but, you know, they were perhaps lucky to beat Cameroon. They obviously drew with Ireland, and the other results, it's not like they're hockeying teams or anything. So where would you, like in terms of ranking this and how good it actually is, does it just look better on paper than it does in terms of when you were there watching it?
Well, I think the thing about England, and maybe the thing about that World Cup overall, was it wasn't so much the quality of the football, but it was the drama of it.
And I would add Ireland to this as well, because we didn't actually win a game, which is the funny statistic from it as well.
You know, Cameroon, before Cameroon there was Belgium. England win with their first extra time goal since '66 World Cup final, David Platt. Then the Cameroon game, you know, to come back from 2-1 down, winning extra time, having been outplayed, let's not forget. And then the Germany game, I mean, they're three classics, really. If you think of England World Cup games, how many actually stand out? And yet, I think that's why it's remembered, because of the drama more than the quality. Yeah,
and as I said, Ireland didn't actually win a game, but it was dramatic in the way we got as far as we did. The name Eamon Dunphy, of course, rings loud and clear, and he's almost, and like I suppose his argument, and it's still the same, I'm sure you don't see Irish TV, but he's still there doing his punditry, and every manager passes through his test of, you know, he has a certain aesthetic that he wants to see, and I think most fans do want to see as well, but he is culturally significant both in 1990 and beyond.
Well, I mean, it was intriguing for me to learn kind of the Dunphy story.
Were you very familiar with him beforehand, or was this your first entry into hearing about his story and how he impacts Irish football?
Well, I mean, I was aware of kind of the Millwall books and the, you know, the books he'd written, but I wasn't aware of just quite how much of a fuss he caused over here, because we had our own priorities on the other side of the water in '90. But you know, it was just intriguing to know what he was up to. I spoke to Colin Toybeen, who actually was with him, and it was told by his editor, you know, keep an eye on Dunphy, keep him out of trouble.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing Colin Toybeen said was, you know, he sort of understood why he had the aesthetic argument, but then you saw all of the joy that was being, you know, that was a consequence of what the Irish team were doing. And at what point do you think, well, you know, everyone's loving this, they're enjoying it, so is it worth kicking up a fuss about the way they do it?
Yeah, and the Big Jack Charlton method, of course, obviously works. There's a certain style of football, and there's a great paradox as well that David O'Leary, who had been kind of ignored for a couple of years, then he's the man who, after Packy Bonner is part of the heroics, he's the actual hero as well. It's a bit of a weird one.
No, yeah, very much so. I mean, the fact that he was cut out really, and he's the man. I mean, that's maybe one of the beautiful things about that World Cup. Going back to the drama and the characters. I mean, nobody would have expected Roger Milla to be a hero at 38. Yeah. Schillaci hadn't made his debut for Italy before March of that year. Paul Gascoigne was really improving at international level. So you've got these people like O'Leary who somehow projected as heroes.
Yeah. We're just going to stop the video portion here, but the full interview you're going to hear in podcast form.